The Solar System was an improbable system in the Milky Way galaxy. Life developed on a planet in that system. On a little planet, third from the star, that would come to be called Earth. After a few billion years of formative events for the planet, it came to harbor life, which survived and grew and evolved, almost being wiped out a few times, but always hanging on by the efforts of a few species. Eventually, late in the planet's history, a species evolved in just the right time to acquire sentience, and began to spread across the planet. Those creatures eventually came to name themselves Homo sapiens, or more commonly, humans. Humanity developed as a social species, defying the long-standing, unspoken law of survival of the fittest, helping those who would otherwise die of defects or injuries survive to reproduce and have happy, meaningful lives. They developed a mastery over fire and tools, language, agriculture, economics, and science. With those tools, they set to tearing the universe apart and learning its inner workings, trying to piece together how the universe that created them came to be. There were bumps along the road, however: war, famine, disease, bigotry, greed, and all these things sowed discord and destroyed progress, slowing down humanity's efforts to understand the universe. Wars would rage over resources, to fuel the growth of a particular country, over misunderstandings and social blunders, over morality and the rights afforded to all humans. Through bloodshed and pain, humanity taught itself futility. Mercury, the planet closest to the life-giving star of the Solar System. Once it had been a barren, half-scorched, half-frozen rock. After the traveler came, Mercury was transformed and made fertile, and it became a golden garden world. Once Mercury had flowered with the life of photosynthesizing organisms, but no longer. A timeless evil born of radiolaria and metal bodies, the Vex, emerged from the depths of space and poisoned the planet, transforming it into a computer to calculate reality. Now, in the present day, Mercury was once again a scorched desert, populated only with Vex and their strange thinking architecture. Venus, the second planet from Sol, once of desolate husk with clouds of sulfuric acid and a surface temperature far too hot for liquid water and life by extension. The traveler touched this planet too, breaking down the carbon dioxide atmosphere and rebuilding it, allowing the planet to cool and gain water. After that, flora emerged, making Venus a tropical jungle world ripe enough for fauna to follow. The Vex took interest in this world too, and seeded it with a septenarian complex for testing the prowess of ontology in hopes of weaponizing it. Mars, the fourth planet from the Sun. Humanity looked at Mars with hope to one day walk upon its surface in hopes of finding life, perhaps intelligent life, to prove to themselves that humanity was not alone in the universe. Unfortunately, Mars was just a little too small, its gravity not enough to keep its atmosphere from bleeding off in Sol's solar wind. With no atmosphere to maintain pressure, it too failed to harbor liquid water and life. When the traveler came to Mars, humanity had launched its first manned mission to the Red Planet, the Ares 1, piloted by one Jacob Hardy. The crew expected to fly into thin, dusty atmosphere, but instead found themselves flying into a rising storm. After landing, the crew witnessed rain and hit a several million-year-old desert. As with Mercury and Venus, the Vex took interest in Mars as well, and buried an entrance to the Black Garden, where they worshipped an unknown entity. The Traveler, that being of light and life, once it had brought life to the desolate locations of the Solar System, eventually settled on Earth, rejuvenating the planet and repairing the damage done by humans during their expansion across the planet. And like all things humans discovered, they set to work studying it. Their successes in research and studying the traveler led to the proliferation of aerospace industries. With several worlds now habitable, humanity took to colonizing them, expanding into space. Mars became a bastion of science and engineering, a company known as Clovis Bray developing several key technologies and improving the lives of millions, and saving just as many. Venus became a scholar's haven, the Ishtar Academy, and collectors archiving all knowledge that humanity had and studying new fields with bleeding-edge technology. Humanity, with the Traveler and its light, achieved a golden age. Lifespans increased dramatically. Several diseases and bigotries and outdated worldviews were eradicated forever. But the Traveler had an enemy, a darkness that had hunted it across the universe. Its armies, the Vex among them, soon encroached upon humanity, forcing them back from their colonies and back to the home planet of Earth. In its final breath, the Traveler created ghosts, living machines, to seek out those among the ancient dead who could wield the Traveler's light as a weapon to fight back the darkness. Those first resurrected came to be called Risen. They were blessed with power and the ability to come back from death, but not wisdom. The Risen came to acquire new names, each with their own context: Warlord, Lightbearer, Iron Lord, Guardian, Dredgen, just to name a few. But Guardians became the most popular. After Risen was Warlord. The Warlords ruled over the small villages and towns that survived the collapse. They protected the villages from the Fallen, a race of spacefaring pirates whose technology hinted at the Traveler's influence. In return, the Warlords had absolute authority. Often, Warlords would overstep on another's territory and ended up causing petty squabbles that could level cities. Eventually, those tired of those dark days founded a new faction, the Iron Lords, who had paved the way for the Lightbearers to unite a single front against the Fallen and to protect humanity as guardians. This led to the founding of the last city, the city beneath the Traveler, surrounded by the Titan's walls. Now, a lone female hunter, a guardian, stood atop a stone cube above the sands of Mercury, overlooking a massive triangular Vex interplanetary gate. This particular gate led to the inner workings of the reality calculating engine known as the Infinite Forest. The hunter took a deep breath and leapt down, breaking into a sprint towards the gate. Though several Vex units tried to stop her, their shots didn't connect their target. Her ship passed overhead, pulling her inside before thrusting forward into the gate. On Earth's moon at the same time, a massive Vex unit dubbed the Undying Mind fell to a group of Guardians. This Undying Mind was the last of all realities calculated in the Infinite Forest, and with its destruction, the Infinite Forest in error never before seen by the Vex nor anything else. Deep in the heart of the ever-free forest, a triangle of light opened up, and a tremor shook Equestria. Chapter 1: Fallen on the Horizon. Princess Luna looked up at her night sky to inspect her work. At least, that's what she told other ponies she was doing. In reality, she was just staring off into space and thinking her own thoughts. Each star had a place in the tapestry of the night. Some fit into constellations, others off on their own, but all of them fit somewhere. The clock struck 12, and Luna returned to her quarters, steeling herself for a nightly patrol through the dreamscape. Though she was a princess of Equestria, Luna's room would be considered fairly normal by the average pony. Beamed in midnight blues and a contrasting bright silver, the room felt as though it were an extension of the pony to whom it belonged. The walls were adorned with few paintings of important ponies she met over the years. One such was of herself and Celestia when they were much, much younger. The princess lay down in her bed, the soft linens and plush foam of the bed making her quite comfortable. After assuring she was adequately prepared for her task, Luna stepped otherways into the dreamscape. Otherways was the best way she could sum up what it felt like to enter the realm of dreams. If pressed, she'd add that it was much like stepping backwards while facing backwards. Words had never had Words had never been her strongest method of communication. She tended to get meaning and thoughts across better through art and music, her night sky being her greatest canvas for conveying her feelings. Yes, the stars betrayed her thoughts, shining brightly when joyful or excited, and twinkling like tears when she cried. She stepped into the dreamscape and looked out into the night, each dream a star shining through the cold darkness. She trotted along, seeking out to those dreams that seemed dimmer and darker, peering in to check on the ponies within. Several dreams seemed to call her attention, the scent of fear urging her to come snuff the source. But one dream seemed unfamiliar, almost alien. The star she saw was blackened out near completely, blazing with etheric umbra. Black flames licked outwards, threatening to affect those nearby with whatever poison was in that pony's mind. Though this one did not have the same pull on her that the others did, she feared that she feared what might happen to her subject if it was left to pollute the dreamscape. With nearly a second thought, Luna dove into the strange dream. 6 creatures stood in a room only barely illuminated by crystals on the ceiling. The creatures were not ponies, that much was clear. They stood about as tall as her, and on only 2 legs like minotaurs. All of them were well armored and carried strange items in their hands and on their backs, each different from the last, but with similarities between them. None of the colors on the creatures' armor matched each other, but they seemed to be a cohesive enough unit. 2 of the creatures had particularly light-looking armor and bore capes that fell down to their knees. Another 2 of bulkier armor had cloths hanging from their hips. The final 2 wore robes similar to those common among the royal mages from long ago, with glowing bands around their arms. All of them spoke in a language Luna had never heard in all her life. Luna watched as one dropped a massive battle standard into the ground, the skull of some creature crossed with spikes and then circled in chains adorning the top. Each one touched the standard and began noisily messing with their carried items. One of the bipeds took a step forward, calling out into the dark, likely a name, but Luna couldn't tell. Before she had time to think on it, something emerged from the darkness. A massive dragon-like creature crawled out into the dim light. Its face was covered in 4 bony plates covering its eyes and jaws. Even in the dream, this creature exuded an intense aura of dark magic. Even on all 4s, the dragonoid was at least 3 times taller than Twilight's library. By estimation, she figured it could be more massive than Canterlot Palace. What kind of creature is that? And where is this dream's host? Luna wondered to herself. Upon that thought, one of the caped creatures fell to its knees screaming in agony. A voice, almost too familiar, spoke in a language she didn't understand. The biped that fell began to transform, its body growing bones from its skin and through its armor. The same bony plates on the dragonoid's face developed on the biped's, followed by 4 long tentacles with sharp stingers at the end from the back of its head like a mane. A moment later, the formerly caped figure now closely resembled the looming dragon. The bipeds began to panic, and the sound of firecrackers filled the room for a brief moment. If she wasn't watching so closely, she would have missed it, as fire and explosions burst forth from the ends of the strange items in the biped's hands. The transformed one turned against all of them. One of its stingers lurched forward, impaling one of the 2 with the bulky armor with absolutely no effort. The second stinger made a wide sweep, smacking the exploding things from the hands of its targets. One of the robed ones went to raise its hand to attack, but didn't get to finish the motion. The transformed biped turned and opened its maw, spewing black flames at the robed one, causing it to scream in panic and attempt to snuff the flames. The other caped figure drew a blade, quick as lightning, and charged it with some kind of magic. It attempted to lunge forward, and to its credit, it was fast. Just not fast enough to avoid a roar that crushed it into the ground as though it had been stomped by the dragon. The remaining two bipeds were each stabbed with the remaining two stingers, as the two fell to the ground in shock with blood spilling from their abdomens. Luna caught the scent of arousal. The final biped returned to its original form, its armor in shambles, exposing pale blue skin from tears and the armor's underlayer. Words were spoken once more by the dragon, and the biped fell to its knees crying. "And there's the host," Luna mused to herself as she attempted to dull the shock of the violence she just witnessed. As the dream faded away, Luna felt compelled to step forward and comfort the being. However, turned out to be a mistake. At the moment she took a step, the sound of hoof on stone echoed in the darkness. Luna froze, and time followed suit. Never before had she felt her heart pound so hard against her ribs. Never before had her body just refused to continue moving. Her breath caught in her throat, and she watched in slow motion as the biped turned, pulling one of the exploding things from a loop on its belt and pointing it directly at her. The figure loosed it at the explosion, and before she could process seeing the fire escape the end of the thing. "Ah!" She screamed out as pain exploded from her horn, as though it had been shattered into fragments. Luckily, the pain faded just enough for her to become capable of speech, though it did remain at a significant degree. The door burst open and a bat-winged pony entered, halberd raised at its owner, scanned for whatever made the princess scream. That pony, a mare whose keying mark was a shield of a crescent moon, called out to Luna, "Princess, I'm okay," Luna managed to gasp out as she clutched at her head, trying in vain to dull the pain. "Please send out for my sister." Without question, the Thestral stepped outside and bolted down the hall towards the solar wing of the palace, leaving Luna to her pain and memories of the dream that caused it. Was that a dream? Was it a dream? Or a memory? What was that scent? Luna! And what even was that creature whose dream that was? I've never seen anything like it. Luna! Something dangerous has appeared, and it falls to me to find out. Luna! Celestia's voice approaching royal cantilene volume, breaking Luna from her thoughts. With her sister now aware of her company, Celestia tried again. "Dearest sister, you sent for me, and Captain Saber told me you were screaming. What happened?" Luna huffed indignantly. "It was but one scream," causing Captain Saber to roll her eyes with a faint grin. "But yes, I was forcibly ejected from the dreamscape." "Has it ever happened before?" Celestia asked. "Never in all my years in that place," Luna confirmed. Celestia gave her a worried expression, asking without words for her to continue. "Remember how I described the dreaming as like floating amongst my stars? With each star a dream of a pony sleeping beneath my night?" Celestia nodded. "Yes, I remember. When I went into the dreaming tonight, I found one star as sickly black. Never have I seen such an image," Luna said. "It looked like it was on fire and threatened to poison the dreams nearest to it." "So you investigated," Celestia said, pushing the story towards the pertinent information. "What did you see in that pony's dreams?" "It was no pony's dreams," Luna said gravely, earning a rare sharp raised eyebrow from her sister. "Nor griffin, nor minotaur, nor anything else on this world. Something other has emerged in Equestria." Luna paused, waiting for a moment to see if her sister or her captain had anything to say. When they stayed silent, she continued. The dream I saw was violent. There were 6 armored creatures. They stood on 2 legs like minotaurs, and they carried strange weapons. They had come to slay a dragon-like creature that could easily have been the size of this palace. One of them transformed into something much like the dragon they came for, and slaughtered all of the others before they could cast a barrier. When it finished, it returned to nowhere and cried out its dead comrades. Celestia now had both of her eyebrows raised, and the captain fell back onto her haunches as she imagined the sheer combat prowess she'd need to beast 5 of her equals at once. When I went to comfort the creature, it raised its weapon and somehow it forced me from the dreamscape, Luna said as she debated in her mind whether or not to bring up the scent of arousal she picked up. Sister, I cannot enter the dreaming. I must yield to your expertise, Celestia said carefully. What action should we take if any regard this matter? I fear we must gather more information. The more we have, the more it will go when it comes time to confront it. But one thing is certain, we must not engage this being in combat. Its strange weapons are ranged and have immediate lethality. We should only invite the massacre if we challenge this being head-on, Luna said solemnly. Tonight I shall consult the archives, and tomorrow I shall head to the old castle to see if any of my squirreled-away texts have anything on this creature. What the hell even are we? A male-sounding voice said. Its owner, a ghost, flitted around looking at the planet life around the crash site. I'm not picking up any signs of Vex, even though we should be in the forest right now. How are we in an actual forest? You're asking as many questions that are well above my pay grade, a feminine voice replied. Its owner, a humanoid clad in light armor and a cloak, stared at her burning shipwreck, sighing defeatedly as she checked her own equipment. I'm just a hunter. Can you check the constellations and cross-reference the star maps we got from the academy? Bah! Of course The ghost stopped abruptly, freezing for a moment not before turning around and floating over to the hunter. Problem. I don't see any of the constellations I should. Not even Ursa Major or Orion. The hunter paused. Shouldn't we see those even from Io? That's the point. I don't see them, the ghost said, motioning with a piece of its shell upward to the night sky. As the hunter looked up, she froze, witnessing a brand new sky. Gone were all of the constellations of the Sol system. Gone was the pale glow of the Milky Way galaxy. Gone were the sickly, shattered remains of the moon. Instead, she saw a new moon, whole and glowing with a peaceful pale light. Luna, I think we're lost. Yeah, definitely, she replied. She pulled off her hood and helm, revealing her face for the first time in 2 years. Her skin was a pale blue, and her amber eyes glowed with each their own light. Soft, short, darker blue hair fell back into its natural style, sticking up in places to make it look as though her head bore flames. Her armor was freshly repainted, but the scars of battle were still echoed into it. Softer bits were sewn together by hasty field stitches, and the dents and scratches were still there, attended to after one particular incident she'd been trying to forget. Awoken, that was what her people were called, a subspecies of human that emerged after the collapse. Many of those who tried to flee Earth on the colony ships met their ends at the asteroid belt. But those who didn't die were transformed. Something out there at the edge of the deep black. A rustle in the bushes. Luna crouched low and drew a hand cannon from the holster on her thigh. As she levied the weapon upon the source of the sound, a loud howl resounded from the woods just past the tree line. One by one, 10 wolf-like predators emerged from the undergrowth, causing Luna to lower her weapon just a little. Are those things made of wood? One of the wooden wolves leapt forth with its jaws wide open for a bite, earning a meal of blazing lead instead. The hand cannon kicked in her grip, a high-caliber bullet ripping through the creature's head and killing it instantly. Upon the creature's corpse hitting the ground, it exploded violently, searing two more of the creatures just enough to send them yipping back into the forest. When another two lunged, Luna put holes in both of them too, their bodies exploding after the bullet pierced their skulls. The remaining five attacked all at once, making Luna jump into the air and then again in the air for just a little extra height. He then took aim and drew a void bow. The arrow of void light hit one of the wolves and killed it instantly. When the arrow made contact, a small purple sphere formed before lashing out with tethers and attaching to the four remaining enemies. The wolves yelped as they had their strength sapped, and the magic kept keeping the wooden bodies together failed. They crumbled to the ground without Luna having to fire another shot. That was Luna's go-to weapon of light, Shadow Shot. Her connection with Void Light allowed her to wield the bow. Wherever the arrow hit, anything nearby became ensnared in draining tethers of Void Light that suppressed the abilities of anything caught in it and weakened the resistance to damage. Hunters who wielded the Void Bow were called Night Stalkers. They were those who made the monsters scared and lit the way for others. Luna had taken up that role when she first resurrected, all those years ago. Well, now we have some firewood, Luna said, picking up the bundles of wood. Save me some effort. Keep scanning for anything useful. Radio frequencies, weather data, anything useful. If we're lost, then we should gather as much intel as we can before we accidentally piss off the locals. In the meantime, I'm gonna make a fire and then take a nap. With that, Luna set to rearranging the wood into a small pile surrounded by large stones, making sure the area was clear. She plucked a small spear from a belt and bouncing it off to a piece of wood before taking it on her hand again. Stand by for resurrection. The spear exploded in a blast of flames, killing Luna outright, but lighting the campfire perfectly well. The ghost, having seen Luna do far dumber things, really sighed in exasperation and expanded his shell, tapping into the light and extending it to Luna's corpse. With a sharp gasp, Luna sat back up, perfectly fine, no worse for wear. With a satisfied smirk, she sat down against a particularly large tree and let herself drift to sleep. She stood in the final room with her fire team at her back. Not her fire team, just a team she decided to work with this once. The mission was to enter the Dreaming City to kill the last known Ahamkara, Ribbon of 1,000 Voices. The Ahamkara, also known as the Wish Dragons of Venus, had been hunted to near extinction in the early days of the city. Their ability to bend reality to grant wishes made them powerful, and during the founding days, the city needed power. But their ability to feed on the desires of those who sought them out and incite madness made them a threat. Until the city came to its consensus, the Ahamkara must be driven to extinction. On paper, the mission to kill Riven was simple, but unfortunately, it was at least a little more complicated than that. Riven had been taken. Her will had been removed by some entity and replaced with something else. This complicated matters, as fighting the remnants of the taken army would be difficult if Riven was acting as a new leader for them. Her team consisted of 6, including herself, 2 Titans with the heavy armor made for becoming a wall if needed, 2 Warlocks with the knowledge of the secrets of the universe and the notes hiding in their robes, and, counting herself, 2 Hunters with lean frames for weaving through combat and getting into places no one else could. Each of them had roles to play, and up until now they'd proven they understood their roles. They fought through the watchtower towards the vault, taking down several high-level taken threats. Several times they'd come close to having the light snuffed out forever and returned to death. But now they stood in the final room. Raven was here, waiting for them. Luna called out into the dark, and the voice of Commander Zavala answered. The Ahamkara stepped out from the dark, revealing itself to those who'd come to kill it. Luna blinked. All of the allies she'd come in with were now dead or beyond saving. Even with the ghost, with Riven so close, they couldn't resurrect. One of the warlocks was burning away from black flames, her body no longer moving. The Titan had a hole punched through his armor and body alike, his blood pooling on the floor. Her fellow hunter was crushed into a massive crater as though he'd been stomped to death. The only thing she could think of that could have killed everything so quickly was Vivian. Luna fell to her knees as tears broke loose and streamed down her face beneath her helm. Vivian spoke a few more words, and everything went dark around her, leaving her alone. For a few moments she just sat there and cried. Something that sounded like wood and stone echoed in the darkness. Instinct drove her to act, and her hand snapped her hand cannon from its holster. As she turned to aim the revolver at whatever made the sound, she saw a creature she'd never seen before. It looked much like a horse, but smaller and a bit more stout in stature. Its body was covered in midnight blue fur, and its mane rolled as though it were under water, and Luna could see the stars through it. On its head was a long horn of the same color, likely made of either bone or keratin. Upon it seeing her, its wings clamped to its side as though it startled. The shot came out. Luna shot awake, but managed to keep herself quiet. She'd had that dream nearly every night for 2 years now, but this wasn't the first time that the horse creature had shown up. She looked up, seeing that the moon had indeed traveled a significant distance through the sky, and was about halfway down to the horizon. That dream again? The ghost asked, already knowing the answer. Yeah, but this time a weird horse thing showed up at the end, Luna recounted, panicked and shot it, and apparently killing it woke me up. That's new, the ghost replied. Think it meant anything? Luna shook her head before picking herself off the ground. Nah, probably not. Just a dream. Now, let's see what all survived our crash, shall we? Chapter 2. Into the Wild. From a crashed ship, Luna was able to recover most of her weapons, though a particularly special rocket launcher didn't make it. Enough crates of ammunition synthesizers to level a city, a few spare pieces of armor, all of her personal belongings, which included several journals, some of which were still blank, a few boxes of meal rations that she hoped would not prove to be her only food source, 7 transmat beacons in case she needed to quickly move either her stuff or herself in a hurry, and the key parts of both her glimmer mining drill and her fabricator. If she did it right, she could get started on setting up a shelter that could protect her should the locals, if there were any, come looking for her. She took a fusion rifle and a sword from a pile of weapons and returned the others to her hiding spot in a hollow tree. Well, let's see. Well, here's what I can pick up from my scans, her ghost said. Local weather patterns suggest this forest sees just enough rainfall to not wash the soil of the important stuff, so vegetation will be thick. There's a low pressure front coming in from the west, and there might be a storm following it. Also, the terrain is pretty uneven, with some deep ravines. Watch your step. Well, good thing I happen to own a machete, Luna said, pulling one from the crate of her personal belongings. Well, first thing I'm going to need to survive out here is water. Any water sources nearby that you can pick up? Yeah, there's a bog a bit to the south of here, so I picked up some loud noises coming from that direction, her ghost advised. There's also a river that leads into the bog a ways north, but I picked up some weird energy fluctuations from that direction. Might be the locals. I guess we I guess we should hit the bog then, Luna said, already beginning her trek south. Luna found herself oddly at peace as the 5 a.m. light began to illuminate the sky, staining the clouds overhead a brilliant pink. A dense fog clung to the ground, obscuring her footing just enough to be mildly annoying. Though the foliage was quite dense, she opted not to use a machete unless she had to, instead favoring using her triple jump to clear obstacles. Even when she'd fallen into a ravine that she'd been warned about, Luna just jumped right back out again, as having 2 jumps in midair was quite handy. She made her way for about 4 miles before she finally found the bog. Mangrove trees lined the shallow waters, their twisted roots providing invaluable cover for small aquatic or amphibious animals, and the branches a place to roast for birds. A few aquatic grasses like cattail plants also sprung up from the water, refusing to be drowned. A few meters away, Luna saw a frog resting on the lily pad. Alright, let's get a few samples and test if this water is safe first, Luna said, grabbing a pair of bottles from the backpack hidden by her cloak. She filled both bottles quickly, screwing the caps back on and putting them away once more. When she turned to leave, however, a tremor shook the ground, causing her to stop in her tracks. A loud roar resounded in the air. That doesn't sound good, the ghost said, floating back under the cloak to hide. No, it does not, Luna said, drawing the fusion rifle from its place on the small of her back and flipping to safety. That sounds less than friendly. Another tremor, and then another. The ground shook with what was presumably the footsteps of some giant creature approaching. Luna spun around to face where the sound seemed to be coming from, only to be met with the sight of a massive reptilian creature barreling through the bog straight towards her. Four heads glared at her, one breaking eye contact to roar at her. Is that a hydra? Luna yelled, mostly to herself in disbelief. Seeing as the creature was almost on her, Luna broke into a sprint towards it. Right as the head was about to snap at her, Luna pulled back on her own chest, diving into a power slide through the water and underneath the creature before pulling herself back up and resuming running before the hydra could turn back around. But the strategy only bought her a pair of seconds, which she then used to turn around and pull the trigger on her fusion rifle. The weapon hummed in response, pulling energy from its battery magazine and charging the liquid coils. Once the weapon had reached full charge, 7 bolts of flaming solar plasma shot from the barrel in rapid succession, slamming into one of the Hydra's heads. The burning weapon's fire made the Hydra head recoil in pain before another head lashed out to attack her. Fortunately, Luna managed to leap sideways into a dodge roll. In response to the simple attack, Luna grabbed a small spear from a belt and tossed it at one of the Hydra's faces. As it made contact, the spear exploded into a cloud of harsh smoke, blinding that head and making a gagging cough. The head she originally hit with her fusion rifle then spat water at her with incredible force. Luna leapt up into the air to dodge the pressurized water, hitting a tree fall into the bog behind her when she landed. She glanced behind to the tree, seeing it cut clean through by the attack. She cursed under her breath and made a note to not get hit by that. Then Luna felt the light pulse within her. The void bow was ready, whispering to her to draw it and fell this enemy as she had countless others. She took aim, and then with the same practiced technique, she vaulted into the air, jumping again for the extra height. And then she drew the bow. The arrow of void light hit the water at the Hydra's feet, making the Hydra stare down at the spear of purple light, curious what was happening. With a loud pop, the spear lashed out and tethered all 4 heads, pulling them down into the water, and suppressing the Hydra's strength and regenerative properties. Luna then drew her sword, holding it with both hands, and approached. One by one, Luna sliced off the heads with 4 uppercut slashes, letting each head fall into the bog. After the final head was cut, Luna bowed to her opponent. Rest in peace, she murmured as she pulled her knife from its sheath on her chest. As blood stained the bog water red, Luna began to pull scales from the creature with the aid of her knife. Think those scales will be useful? Her ghost asked. Possibly. That fusion rifle shot did piss damage, Luna replied as she pried another scale loose. Figured they might have some solid solar resistance. This continued until the sun was high in the sky, until she finally finished the task of gathering materials from the Hydra's corpse. Fluttershy found herself heading towards the Everfree bog to release a few frogs back into the wild. While she was certainly terrified of the place, in no small part due to the fact that Hydras lived there and were incredibly territorial, she couldn't help but want to put the frogs back where they belonged. Plus, Twilight had offered to come with her, and the Alicorn's presence made her feel safer. So she steeled herself for the trip, even as the sound of the Hydra roaring echoed from far away. As she carried the box of frogs, She kept watching the tree line for movement. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of movement from just behind the tree line, making her freeze up. From what she saw, it was a very tall creature, just big enough to be a manticore. Did you see that? Fluttershy asked, her voice wavering just a little. I think so. I didn't catch a good look, Twilight said. God, that's a horrible Twilight impression, but it's my best. She placed a comforting wing over her friend's back. It's probably nothing. A few minutes passed, but she didn't see any more movement, so she resumed, feeling ever so slightly more anxious. Manticores were supposed to be nocturnal after all, so if one was moving around at this time of day, it was certainly out of the ordinary. Eventually, the pair made it to the bog with all the frogs. Fluttershy found a suitable spot and set down the box at the edge of the water and opened it up, allowing the frogs to hop out. She smiled softly at them, reassuring them that they were safe. As the frogs hopped out onto the lily pads, a tendril of red moved through the water, followed by a slow fog of red. The scent of blood followed. Twilight? Fluttershy muttered softly, looking up and scanning the area. Twilight was already moving towards the river that fed the bog. Come on, some pony might be hurt, she asked. Fluttershy suppressed a scared squeak and scrambled to join her friend. The scent of blood only got thicker as they went upstream, and soon they found the source. Fluttershy froze at the sight. A hydra lay dead in the bog, all four heads cut off, and its body picked clean of scales. One of its legs was missing, as was its tail. Something had definitely killed this hydra, and judging by how much blood was still seeping from the body, the kill was fresh. These wounds are too clean to have been another hydra, or any other creature we know of, Twilight observed out loud. And there's galvanization on the vertebrae. If a pony did this, they must be in the royal guard for lightning enhancement of this grade. I don't think a pony could have done this, Fluttershy said. Except the princesses, but they wouldn't. I think you might be right, Shy, Twilight said. We should head back and report this to the princesses. Fluttershy nodded, eager to leave this place. Something more dangerous than a hydra was in those woods, and she wanted no part of whatever scarier monster had managed to kill something already so terrifying. The trip back to her cottage was short, as both decided it would be best to hurry home to get away from any potential danger. Normally, Fluttershy would take her time with Twilight on the way back, using the opportunity to talk to her friend and enjoy her company. It wasn't often that they got to spend time together, and every moment was precious to her, but not this time. They soon arrived back at Fluttershy's cottage, where Spike was animatedly. Oh boy, this is taking a lot out of me. I apologize. Give me a sec. With a rabbit. Spike! Twilight called as she approached at a brisk trot. She pulled a parchment and quill from a saddlebag. Take a letter. Spike, relieved that he didn't have to get yelled at by a mute bunny, took the writing equipment and asked, Who are we writing? That sounded so retarded, but I'm just gonna make Spike sound retarded. I apologize. Princess Celestia. Dear Princess Celestia, while out in the Everfree Bog with Fluttershy, we encountered a Hydra. We are safe and unharmed, as the Hydra was already dead. While noteworthy in its own right, the details and manner of its death are what have me concerned enough to write to you. The Hydra had been killed by something, or some pony. When we found it, it couldn't have been dead for more than 8 hours. All four heads had been cut clean off in a single strike each. The vertebrae were galvanized, suggesting a weapon with a high-grade lightning enhancement. Additionally, the tail and right foreleg are missing, and the scales appear to have been stripped post-mortem. The only ponies with the skill and access to the weapon necessary to kill a Hydra like this would be among the elite of the Royal Guard, but I don't think any pony did so. There was evidence of an unknown magic type leaning on the Hydra, but the effect was equal to that of an ultimate Fuck's sakes. Suppression spell. Something dangerous has emerged in the Everfree Forest. I will keep you updated if anything like this happens. Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle. Celestia read the letter for the 5th time, taking in all the information she'd been given. After court was adjourned for the day, she'd hoped she could relax and take a nice warm bath, but no such luck. The relaxing bath would have to wait for just a little longer. She turned down the corridor and rolled the parchment back up before tucking it under her wing. Upon witnessing her, the lunar guard snapped to a salute. "Good evening, Lightning Lieutenant Wind," the princess greeted. "I'm here to see my sister." The guard stepped aside, and Celestia knocked at the door. "Enter," came the voice from within. Celestia opened the door and stepped inside. Once the door was closed, she pulled Twilight's letter back out from its spot beneath her wing and levitated it over to Luna. "It seems my student has a lead on our new threat," Celestia said as Luna eyed the letter curiously. Luna opened the letter and read it carefully. As she read, her face took on graver expressions until the very end, leaving her with a dark scowl. "Sister, does this make you think what I'm thinking?" "Depends on what you're thinking," Celestia replied. This, be- this being is a seasoned warrior with magics we may not be aware of. If that dream and this Hydra have anything to go by, we may have a threat to not just Equestria, but the world on our hooves," Luna said. She had let the full gravity of those words sink in for a moment. "I believe we should contact the other nations." "No, not yet," Celestia sighed. "I do believe you, sister, but I cannot imagine the other world leaders believing us as well. There are many who do not know of your dream-walking ability, and the incident of one Hydra's death is not significant enough to bring up." Luna took in the words. It was true that her dream-walking ability was largely unknown, especially outside of Equestria. Her influence only reached to the borders of the country. "I understand." Celestia gave Luna an affectionate nuzzle. "So, did you find anything on our strange creature?" "Creature?" I'm very sorry, but talking in a royal accent takes a lot, take a lot out of me. Oh boy, oh damn it, ran out of my drink. We had to go after I finish this chapter, or get more. Apologies. Luna shook her head. "Nay, 'twas a fruitless venture. The only bipedal races in our records are the Minotaurs of Labyrinthian and some of the dragons." "And you plan to go to Everfree tonight to check your hidden cache?" Celestia asked, her expression belying her anxiety. Luna nodded. "Information is key." Please be careful, Lulu," the Solar Princess paused. "Please be careful, Lulu." I'm gonna ask for that line. The Solar Princess said softly, pulling her sister into a close hug. "If the ultimate suppression is true, I promise I'll be okay," Luna said. "Thou shalt see us return this morning." Celestia smiled weakly at her sister. "I will hold you to it. Good night, Lulu. Be safe." With that, the Solar Princess got to her hooves and departed, leaving Luna to prepare herself for her mission. Luna entered a side room off her bedroom, where she kept things that were best not left in the hooves of mortals. Immediately, the scent of stale air mixed with the cooling night air from outside, giving the room a feeling of being stuck outside of time. The outside was lined wall to wall with weapons forged by masters of blades, and enchanted by some of the greatest mages of the times. Rapiers, broadswords, longswords, cutlasses, even a few claymores were among her collection. Some had enhancements that summoned flames, others lightning, and still others ice. But with knowledge of her quarry, she decided it would be best to wear the humble shield. After all, she was not going looking for a fight. She knew full well what the strange creature was capable of. She pulled a large shield from the bunch that seemed almost to have a crown of 3 prongs at the top and set it against her saddlebag. In addition, she opened a large jewelry box and retrieved a pair of rings and an amulet, which she promptly donned. The first ring was a plain silver band, enchanted with a spell that would help conceal her magical potential and presence. Hopefully, it would work well enough to keep the being from noticing her too soon. The second was a golden band with an emerald, ruby, sapphire, and topaz set within it. This one was enchanted to grant the bearer significant regenerative properties. If she was attacked and managed to escape, that ring would, again, hopefully, keep her from succumbing to mortal wounds. Finally, the amulet bore the royal seal and would act as a beacon for his sister to find her should something go wrong. With her saddlebags packed with anything else she thought she might need of, she donned them and took off into the rising night. Luna had always loved flying. It was the ultimate activity of freedom, where gravity's influence was more of a suggestion than an oppressive law, and there was always a straightaway to the pony she saw. The wind in her mane and over her wings always made her smile. Even with the dire circumstances of this flight, Luna couldn't help but smile and enjoyed the feeling of flight. As she approached the Everfree, she noticed a small pillar of smoke and the soft orange glow of a fire, likely from the creature's camp. Luna decided to dive down towards the fire. She landed about half a mile away for her safety and proceeded on foot from there. She made her way through the dense overgrowth and ensured she was sufficiently loud. Holy shit. So that the creature would hear her coming and not react in panic. This fanfic has 30 chapters, and I'm in chapter 2. Oh boy, calm down. It's gonna be a total of 5 chapters per vid, but it's for you guys. Okay. The tree line broke into a perfectly triangular clearing, with a massively deformed metal object lying in a small crater in the dirt, scorch markings lining the edges. A small campfire was going, and just off by a tree, the same creature she'd seen in her dream sat with its strange weapon in hand. Luna stood still for a moment, watch her. She cautiously moved her hoof forward and raised the weapon just a little more. She pulled it back, and the weapon returned to its relaxed state. Luna took a step towards the fire, but was met with only the turning of the creature's head to follow her. She sat down and pulled off her shield and saddlebags. She then slowly opened one, and lit her horn to grasp an apple, to which the creature raised its weapon to her. She let go of the magic and performed the action manually, placing the apple on the ground and moving away from it, watching the creature carefully. The creature looked at the apple, then at her. Perhaps understanding, it lowered the weapon and cautiously approached. It then reached down and picked up the apple, inspecting it closely before setting it back down. Luna gasped as the creature pulled back the hood and removed its helm, revealing its face to her. Pale blue skin and dark blue hair and glowing amber eyes, with a tiny triangular nose and soft cheeks, and rounded ears on either side of her head instead of on top. She was shocked at just how different and yet similar they were. The creature's face carried an expression that looked very similar to a smile. It spoke a single word, and a small shape appeared over her shoulder, peeking out from the cape. It looked, if she remembered geometry correctly, it looked like a small sphere in the center of a stellar octahedron. It floated without magic, in which his little blue eye, at least it seemed like an eye, looked at the apple before saying something. The creature, seeming satisfied, took a bite, its eyes widening as it looked at the apple in what could easily be wonder, before taking another bite, and another. It ate the apple down to its core, and tossed the core into the fire to be burned away. The creature then stood and went to the metal object in the crater, and produced a hydra's tail, cut cleanly and descaled. It brought as well a small metal grating that looked much like an oven's cooking rack. With that, it set the rag over the flame and began carving the tail into slices with a large knife with a hooked blunt edge. Once one was cut, she sliced it in half and set both halves on the rack to cook. The creature then spoke to her, but she couldn't understand, so she simply tilted her head in gesture of confusion. Oh fuck. I can't tell if this is the hunter or the princess. Since it just says Luna. Like, can't you, like, label it? Like, the hunter is Luna and the princess is Princess Luna? Fuck. Okay, so when it comes to Luna speaking, I might get a little confused and get the wrong voice, so just bear with me. Can you understand me? Luna asked. The creature tilted its head. That was Princess Luna, wasn't it? Fuck it. The creature tilted its head in response. Luna sighed and lit her horn one more time, causing. Okay, so for now, they're referring to the hunter as the creature. Okay, causing the creature to watch her with wide eyes while its head tightly gripped its weapon. From her saddleback, she produced some parchment and a quill and ink. She then set to writing out the alphabet, hoping that they could realize that quickly before levitating the paper over to them. Yes, it no longer felt an appropriate pronoun to use for this being, not when they had enough intelligence to cook food before eating. Cooking was indeed a distinguishing trait of all sentient races on this planet, and it only felt right that this creature, wherever it was from, be thought of it as sentient. They set about looking over the writing, the floating shape, inspecting it as well. Once they finished, they looked back up at her head and tilted her head, pointing to her with a finger, then back at the parchment. Luna plucked the parchment from the page and wrote her name under the alphabet before giving it back. Luna, she asked. Just so you know, that's my Princess Luna voice. As for the Hunter Luna, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to speak in. I'm afraid I'm gonna speak in like my normal voice, cause yeah. A rustle in the leaves echoed in the night. The being raised its weapon towards the source of the noise, setting the parchment down away from the fire. For a moment, all was quiet save for the occasional crackle of the fire. Then a pack of timberwolves began to reveal themselves, eyes glowing a haunted green as they began to surround the two of them. The being looked confident, calling out into the night, causing the wooden creatures to attack. The sound was deafening. The being didn't even flinch as the weapon exploded in her hands, flames discharging from the hollowed end. The timberwolf fell to scrap wood instantly, its body violently exploding like a firework. Two more, this pair with scorch marks on their sides, lunged from opposite directions, attempting to pincer the being. The maneuver failed spectacularly as the being jumped up into the air and then again in midair without a flap of wings or any recognizable magic. The weapon exploded again, and both timberwolves were consumed in a fiery explosion. Then one more explosion from the weapon, and one explosion behind her. Luna whipped around to see a timberwolf to be annihilated behind her. Three more attempted to attack her, but Luna brought her shield up in time for the wolves to smack their faces against hard metal. But before she could cast an offensive spell, a strange noise sounded from off to the left. It sounded much like a modern vacuum cleaner spinning up for a brief moment, and the sound of heavy rain on stone. A spray of glowing orange tore through all three timberwolves, piercing them with ease. As the beams of light faded, the timberwolves burned away within seconds, leaving not even ash behind, as though their very existence had been consumed by the fire. In the being's hand was another of its strange weapons, a little bigger than the first, enough to be carried with both hands in different places on it. The being inspected the surroundings, and upon seeing that the threat was neutralized, set its weapon down and returned to the fire, flipping its scythe of hydra tail over to cook the other side. Luna hesitantly relaxed in the span of 5 seconds. This being had had eliminated 7 Timberwolves, 4 of which had been targeting her. "What harsh world requires warriors as skilled as you?" Luna asked as she sat back down, knowing the being wouldn't understand her. After a few more minutes, the being plucked the meat from the rack and skewered both pieces on knives, holding one out to her as an offering. Luna smiled and shook her head, pulling another apple from a saddlebag. The being shrugged and began munching on the skewered meat, still reading over the parchment. After eating, the figure reached into a pouch on the belt and removing some kind of stylus. With a small click, they began to write on the parchment. Luna waited with bated breath. Did the creature know it was an alphabet? Was it inscribing some translation spell? Could it perform such magic? It had performed some kind of spell with ultimate suppression, so it stood to reason that a translation spell would be within this creature's repertoire. As the parchment was handed back, Luna saw the alien symbols but looked them over closely. She mimicked the creature's gesture, pointing to them and then at the page, folding it back over. They wrote a couple of the previous symbols and handed it back, saying a word in their native tongue. The excitement of interacting with this being made her heart race. The possibilities of what knowledge they could share, how Pony society could change, the technology that could emerge, and all made her feel like she was flying. She retrieved another piece of parchment and began drawing a small picture. It showed herself and the creature leaving the forest, then getting on a train, arriving in Canterlot, and meeting with herself and her sister, and one Twilight Sparkle. She passed the page over to the being and looked at them hopefully. As they inspected the page, they began to speak to the floating shape over their shoulder. After a couple of minutes of this, the being shook their head side to side, turning the page over and drawing something else. The new image depicted Luna leaving back to Canterlot by train, then returning with her sister and Twilight to the forest, with the figure still being by the fire. It also added a diagram of the sun and moon both at the horizon. Luna nodded at the being, accepting the terms at the next meeting. With that, Luna packed up her belongings and pulled the saddlebags onto her back. With a bow, the princess spread her wings and took off into the waning night. Chapter 3 Contact Zero. Luna watched the strange equine take off into the night, blending into the night sky within seconds. Everything about her interaction with the creature left her with questions that she did not have answers to. How did it levitate the parchment? Why did it have a shield? Why did it come here? What did it want? I think that's the first interaction with an alien race we've had since the spider that didn't end with a gunfight, the ghost mused. Are you sure it understood us? You saw the drawing and wanted to talk to us, but we don't speak the same language. I wanted to bring us to someone who could maybe understand, Luna said, sitting back down and preparing to smoke the remainder of the Hydra meat. It wasn't that bad. Definitely had a strong aftertaste, but it went down fine and it hadn't poisoned her yet. So why did you counter offer? If we were going to meet someone who could possibly understand, wouldn't we want to go meet them? The ghost asked. Simple. Negotiations. Proving my intelligence. If I accepted first thing, I'd be in unfamiliar territory and surrounded by potential hostiles. My offer let them keep up the 3-on-1 number advantage, while I have the territory advantage. This force is hostile, and that creature knows it. She accepted the counter offer because it's fair to both of us, rather than slanted in either party's favor, Luna explained. But it's always slanted in our favor, the ghost said. If you die, I can just bring you back. We're on a completely alien world with its own life and rules. What if that mountain city happens to be in the darkness zone and I can't come back? Or what if you're captured or travel forbid killed? Luna said sternly. This forest is the only area we can guarantee is not a darkness zone, and that's another reason for my counter offer. I can safely die here. Her ghost remained silent. We have to assume everything is a threat here, Luna murmured. Just like in the dreaming city. Everything. Including me. Luna. Luna had already shifted her focus back to smoking the Hydra meat to preserve it. It took until dawn, and after that, she let herself sleep. Dear Princess Twilight Sparkle, we write you in these young hours of the morning to inform you of the fruits of our investigation into the dead Hydra you found. The contents of this letter and its subject matter are as of yet classified to the general public. We have found that the creature responsible, and you are correct to believe it. Holy fuck. Fucking, I'm gonna read this letter in my normal voice. And you are correct to believe it not to be a pony. The creature we found is not of our world, but it is indeed an intelligent sentient life form. We've established contact with the being, discovered evidence that had indeed slayed the Hydra. When we attempted to communicate with language, we failed. Celestia and I shall be arriving at your Golden Oaks Library at 1800 hours. Upon our arrival, we wish you to accompany us to meet with the being and assist us in possibly finding a translation spell, or, should we such an endeavor fail, and assist in exchanging language between us. Enclosed is a copy of what believes to be its alphabet and name, as compared to our own. I cannot talk for shit. As compared to our own and my name, and a copy of the written arrangements made for official first contact. We hope these items assist you in this mission, should you choose to accept it. Signed, Princess Luna. Twilight read the letter over coffee, eye twitching as she felt her brain start itching. First contact was not a phrase she'd ever expected to read outside of fiction novels, and yet it was right there in Luna's own writing. She dreamed about how exciting contact with an alien would be, having read hundreds if not thousands of sci-fi novels on that premise. But she'd also read just as many on how easily that could go horribly wrong, and now that it was happening, she found herself quite understandably anxious. And so, Twilight began searching for the library for anything and everything that might help for a new task. She pulled every book on translation magic she could find and began sorting them by relevance. Then she remembered the possibility that every language would fail to be understandable, and began also gathering picture books for the young foes just learning to read, sorting those by difficulty level. "What are you doing this early in the morning?" came the sleepy voice of Spike. "The sun isn't even up yet." Twilight yelped and jumped like a startled cat, somehow clinging to the ceiling for a moment before gravity caught on to her shenanigans and pulled her back to the floor with a dull thud. "Spike, don't do that!" Twilight groaned as she got back to her hose. "Sorry," he said quickly. "But seriously, what's with the books for folds, and also translation spells?" "Can't tell you. Princess secret stuff," Twilight said, hoping he wouldn't push the issue. "Alright," he said. "I don't need to know why you need these books, but I can still help. What do you need?" Twilight turned and smiled to him. "I need the simplest possible books in Equestria we have. Can you narrow it down to 4? "Easy," the young dragon replied with a sharp salute. "Let me grab us some breakfast first." I don't know why I'm talking in a retarded. I don't know why my Spike voice is so retarded, but fuck it. The day went relatively quickly after that, with the both of them engrossed in their task. Interruptions rarely plagued Twilight when she was immersed in her studies, as Ponyville didn't have nearly as many avid readers as Canterlot did. Thus, she recently ascended Alicorn. Hold on, let me restart that sentence. Thus, Z recently ascended Alicorn was able to hyper-focus on whatever grabbed her attention without feeling guilty about having to be on duty. After a few hours, Twilight and Spike had managed to narrow down which books she needed and packed them into her saddlebags. Once finished, and after a tasty lunch, they put back all of the unused books in their places on the shelves and cleaned the place up. The pair of them finished by 4 in the afternoon. It was at this point that Twilight remembered that she wouldn't be home to put Spike to bed. With a soft curse under her breath, she informed Spike that she was headed out for a few minutes. With that, she made her way towards her friend's house. As usual, Ponyville was fairly mellow at this time of day. The market was slowly down in preparation for the 5 o'clock closing time, and most of the last-minute shoppers were already there. The few ponies out in the main roads were either headed to the market or home from it. On her way, she greeted the mailman, who was finishing off the last foot deliveries for the day. As she turned the corner, she smelled the sweet from sugar cube cumin. Holy shit, I can't. I apologize if I mess up, because reading this is taking a lot out of me. From sugar cube corner filled the air, making her mouth water as it always did. Upon a light rumble from her stomach, she made a note to make a stop there on the way home. She made it to Rarity's and entered with a knock. Oh fuck, this is Sweetie Belle and she has such a high-pitched voice. Fuck it, I'm gonna read in regular voice. Rarity, Twilight's here, Sweetie called as Twilight came in. Hiya, Twilight. Hi, Sweetie. Thanks for calling Rarity, Twilight replied. I know my Twilight voice is terrible, but her voice is voiced by Taylor Strong, and well, let me rephrase that. Twilight's voice is unique and hard to mimic. I only knew 2 people that can voice her perfectly. Well, not perfectly. Like, do a very good impression of her. Sorry for interrupting. The unicorn in question entered from a curtained-off room. Judging by the tape measure around her neck and the red glass on her glasses on her friend's muzzle, Twilight figured she was either working on a new line or was neck deep in an order. Twilight, darling, what brings you in? Okay, Rarity's voice is easy. You just have to speak eloquently. A female eloquent voice. She asked. No, don't tell me. You need a dress for a date? Twilight giggled at her friend's voice. No dates for the foreseeable future. I actually need to ask a favor. I'd be delighted to have Spike over for the night, Rarity replied. The Crusaders are actually having a sleepover here tonight, and having him around as the voice of reason would be a great help. Okay, I don't know if that sounds eloquent, but fuck it. Twilight shot her friend a questioning look. Twilight, if you didn't come to me for assistance with romance, the only thing you'd ask as a favor is to watch Spike, Rarity said, causing Twilight to blush a little from embarrassment. Thank you, Twilight said. I'll send him over by 6. Of course, darling. She approached Twilight in a low whisper. She added, But if I found out you're getting him out of the house for a date or anything of the sort, I'm going to set you up with some pony. Twilight nervously took a step back. I can assure you it's not that, she said. Anyway, I need to head back and get ready. I'm serious about sending you up, Twilight, darling. Twilight, Rarity said with a wave and a smile. Do take care. The princesses arrived perfectly on time, knocking on their door at precisely 6 in the evening. Twilight opened the door and invited them inside. Glad she'd taken the time to clean the library earlier after her research. Both princesses made their way to a table in the middle of the library, where they sat down and waited for Twilight to join them. Once she did, Luna began. Good evening, young Twilight. Okay, that sounds... Okay, Princess Luna's and Rarity's voices sound similar, but again, both of them... Rarity is more eloquent and Princess Luna is, like, royal, so I have to watch out for that. Good evening, young Twilight. Okay. The Luna Princess started. Before we venture into the Everfree to meet the being, we must fill you in on the details we have. Of course, Twilight said as Luna set out some papers, including the 2 that she'd received in her initial letter. Let us start from the beginning. Before you contacted us, we encountered the being in the dreamscape. During its nightmare, we discovered that they were a warrior of some kind, and have killed others for its kind. When we sought to comfort the oh boy. I can already tell this fanfic series is gonna be hell. For my horrible impressions and stuttering. Luna, such a thing has never happened before. Oh, that was too wrong. When we sought to comfort the being, it raised its weapon and ejected us from the dreamscape. Such a thing has never happened before, Luna informed. If its nightmare is more memory than dream, then we have reason to believe the being is capable of transforming, and is extremely violent in its alternate form. For this reason, and due to your letter, I contacted the being myself last night. We found the being near a fresh crater where I had set up camp. The glow of its fire gave us its location. Here. Luna punctuated her point by marking a point on a map of the area. Only 4 miles from the bog. Not an easy trek, especially in that terrain, but doable. At first the being was quite cautious, being the weapon in hand when we first met, and they were especially frightened of magic. We offered them an apple as a peace offering and a test of its dietary habits. At this point, we discovered a strange object in their possession. I have drawn it here. She set forth the drawing of the object, which Twilight looked over carefully. We are lucky that it responded positively. In exchange, it offered us cooked meat at the Hydra you found. We believe it was also testing our dietary habits. We politely declined and ate an apple instead, Luna continued. At this point, we were unable to use magic for the first time. They seemed quite surprised. We believe they may come from a culture where magic is incredibly rare, and they may have been surprised to find another magic user. At this point, we wrote out the alphabet and our name, and believe they have done the same with its own writing utensil. Since my banishment, many languages the world over have changed quite significantly. My translation spells are beyond outdated. This is where you come in, young Twilight Sparkle. From what Tia has told me, you are one of the most brilliant minds of its generation. What can say in response to our letter? Luna finished. I accept. I'd be more than happy to help any way I can, Twilight replied. Luna smiled. Very well. The three left the library and took for the air. Twilight, though not as strong a flyer as the other princesses, was able to keep up. Luna then pointed at the small column of smoke that signaled the being's camp, and signaled towards it. As Luna led the way, Luna hung back for a beloved student. Are you nervous? The solar princess asked. Yeah, I really am. Yeah, I really am. That's a good enough Charlie impression, I guess. This is history in the making, and everything hinges on our interactions with this being. It's okay to be nervous, Twilight, Celestia said, a dim, weak smile on her face. I am too. Twilight felt time around her freeze as she got a rare glimpse of a mentor beneath the mask of royalty. I'm sure things will turn out okay, Twilight said, offering her own weak smile to Celestia. I have full confidence in you, my faithful student, Celestia replied. Together, they all descended towards the campsite, landing in the clearing where the being was waiting for them. Twilight's brain went into overdrive as she took in every detail she could, trying to make sense of the situation as quickly as possible. The clearing was a perfect triangle, and all of the stumps showed no evidence of being chopped or cut in any way. The crater in the center had a long furrow behind it, leading her to believe that the metal object in the crater had significant forward velocity when it hit the ground. The being waved a hand in the air, much the way a pony would to greet someone who had just entered the field of view. They beckoned the three of them over towards the fire, a few fresh logs placed around it as seating. As they approached, the being took a seat on one of the logs. Over the fire was a metal grate that Twilight assumed was for cooking. Luna sat down at the fire, setting her saddlebags down. From them she produced an assortment of vegetables and a loaf of bread, setting them on one of the unnaturally flat stumps. Then she retrieved some parchment and ink, setting most of it on the stump with the food. The calm with which Luna was approaching the situation reassured Twilight, settling her nerves a bit. Luna proceeded to draw a series of pictures. First was of the four of them cooking and eating together around the fire. Next was Twilight using her magic next to a pair of letters, one equestrian and one of the beings. After that was a split in the series, on the left showing a frown on Twilight's face, then Twilight next to a chalkboard with the being sitting on a log. Okay, I'm honestly confused on what the fuck is going on. I bet you are as well. On the right, Twilight smiling, and all four of them speaking. Are you sure they'll understand that? Celestia asked softly. They understood the first time to negotiate. We'll see if this gets through. If not, we'll try again, Luna said, throwing the parchment over to the being. Luna looked over the paper that the local equines had given to her, deciphering the drawings and deducing the meaning they intended to convey. Her ghost floated over her shoulder, looking over it as well. Alright, be cool. Food first, then we're gonna do that weird thing with the horns. Then there! You know, if they're successful, then we'll be able to talk to each other. But if not, they plan to teach me the language, Luna translated aloud. How did you get all of that? Her ghost asked. It's just pictures. What do you think that rune of lost sectors means? Luna quipped. It means protected secret. If words are unreliable, pictures are communication's next best thing. Her ghost sighed, shaking his shell at her. She handed the paper back to her guest and nodded, earning a relieved smile. Luna set to work cooking, pulling a few choice vegetables from the bunch and placing them on the rack to roast over the open flame. From there, she added a few thin slices of Hydra meat to warm up. The equines then placed their own share of veggies over the fire. Nothing quite like a campfire dinner to bring people together, Luna mused. For a moment, they all way peaceful as all parties waited for the delicious goodies to finish cooking. Luna looked up at the sky, admiring the way the evening sun made the clouds turn bright pink and the sky a brilliant fiery orange. She waited for the moment that the sun set over the horizon, and let the world in the first stages of twilight. But that moment didn't seem to come. She shrugged and returned her attention to the equines. The white one and the midnight one both lit their horns in an odd aura, and within seconds the world was enveloped in the cooling embrace of twilight. Just so you know, that's the time of day, not, Twilight the pony. The pair's horns then faded back to normal, leaving Luna and her ghost very confused. Those two have some incredible power at their disposal. I've never felt any energy quite like that. We've seen some weird stuff, her ghost said in a low voice. Are you sure we're safe here? No, but it's the safest place we have, Luna replied, also having felt an odd disturbance in the atmosphere around her. The energy felt like light solar blazing from the white equine and void whispering from the midnight one. Do you think they have the ability to wield light? No, that was different on the fundamental level, the ghost said. Well, let's just play along for now, Luna sighed. A moment later, everyone began picking the food from the rack, piling the vegetables onto slices of bread. Luna, however, added her cut of Hydra meat. As she bit into the sandwich, she smiled and hummed in satisfaction. Real bread was hard to come by in the city, as was meat. Hunters often could find meat by hunting local fauna, but in the interest of preserving some of the endangered species like deer, they would forgo meat and favored other sources of protein. Blessed be bread, Luna hummed softly. Every culture can be defined by food, art, and war, and what a wonderful first impression bread makes indeed. The three equines seemed to watch her quite intently as they ate, remaining quiet, ears perked in her direction. It was at this point that Luna took a moment to take in the details of the situation. Of the three creatures before her, all three had both wings and a horn, and could tap some unknown energy that felt quite similar to light. The midnight one bore an onyx black tiara and neckpiece. She did not have the rings or amulet it had last time. The mane and tail held the night sky, and seemed to flow in a breeze that didn't exist. On the flank was a darkened splotch with the image of a crescent moon. Of the three, they seemed the most confident with the current situation. Not having names to call them seemed a little annoying and confusing, so she opted to call this one Midnight. The white one had a similar golden tiara and a neckpiece as Midnight. Along with the okay, yeah. Please differentiate the names. Yeah, but I'm gonna. If they refer to Princess Luna as Midnight, that will be so grateful, because you know, Luna and Luna, confusing the two. Along with the cutie mark of a sun on their flank. As with midnight, the main seemed to float in an inferior wind, holding the morning sky. They were the largest of the three by a small margin, with midnight being a close second. Of the three of them, this one seemed the most guarded and cautious. They seemed tense and stiff, eyes constantly watching her every move. This one she decided to nickname Dawn. The third bore a golden tiara with a six-pointed starburst-shaped gemstone set in on it. It had a similarly shaped mark on the flank. Their mane was straight midnight blue, with a single pink streak, and unlike the others, did not flow in the intangible breeze. This one seemed to hold only curiosity in the grays. She could feel a strong desire to learn and understand for them, much like a warlock. The sparkle in their eyes reminded her of Rose, from her own fire team. She figured Sparkle would be an appropriate nickname. After they finished their meal, a howl echoed through the forest, making the equines look around anxiously, save for midnight. Luna, on the other hand, merely sighed in annoyance, standing up and raising the ace from— oh my gosh, she had the ace of spades! Oh right, the story takes place after Forsaken, so yeah, Kate 6 is dead and Luna has the ace of spades. The ace of spades was a great weapon in Destiny. Is a great weapon in Destiny 2, but unfortunately they nerfed it. But it's still good, just not as good as I remembered. Again, I'm sorry for pausing a lot. I really don't feel like editing this out. Standing up and raising the ace from her hips and training it against the dark. One by one, more of the wooden wolves in the previous two nights filtered into the clearing. They snarled and growled in low, threatening tones, and the equines only grew more restless as their numbers were revealed. 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 of the wooden creatures filtered out from the tangled underbrush. Holy shit, 100 timberwolves. With even more remaining in the shallows beyond. Luna smiled a wicked smile and flicked the safety off on the ace. I had a feeling I had to fight tonight, Luna mused to herself. Ghost, stand by for resurrection. As always, he replied. One of the wolves charged forward, ending a swift shot from a hand cannon, ending its life with a single hit to its head. The explosion of its body taking down two more. Right, headshots with the ace can cause people to explode. Luna started stepping back and forth in a measured tempo she'd honed over the decades. Some steps were punctuated with shots, others the sounds of the explosions, some with only the flutter of her cape as she dodged and weaved through the hordes. During a dip in the fighting, she reached out of a light and stretched it with both hands, setting the Word of Dawn above. Wait, Word of Dawn? Hunters can't use Word of Dawn. Okay then. What? I'm just gonna ignore it. Setting the Word of Dawn a bubble of void light around the equines. When one of the wolves tried to enter the bubble, it yelped and clamped its eyes shut, blinded by the light. In a fluid motion, she tapped Sparkle to grab her attention, then kicked the wolf out of the bubble. Sparkle nodded in understanding. With her guests now in the bubble, Luna turned her focus back to the wolves, the crowd having not seemed to dip in number at all. I wish I could clear them all at once, she growled as she began her dance of death once more. Build up your light, O kin of mine. Luna kept up her waltz, shooting down dozens of the wolves, her ward protecting the equines well enough, but beginning to dim. She needed a way to end it all at once. The only person she could think of that kept up that kind of horde was May, with her arc blades, but unfortunately she wasn't here to help. Take the shield, O kin mine. She reached out of her light once more, taking the sentinel shield. Okay. This was written, like, during Destiny 2. A long way, probably, year 3? And the author must know that hunters cannot use Sentinel Shield. Only Titans can do that. Taking the sentinel shield in her hand and letting the void light strangle her tiring muscles, instinct took over, and she raised the disc of light. The voice of Riven spoke from her lips. "O prophetic hordes of the unworthy dark, I sentence you all to rest. God, that really hurts my throat. To rest eternal in the black between stars and cast your screens into the abyss. May you learn this judgment to be merciful and just. Light, sacrifice." Chapter 4. Darkness Zone. Resurrection Restricted. Light, sacrifice! Luna's body screamed. Silence filled the air as all movement stopped. The void light around her pulsed in magnified intensity, and then the shield and the ward faded. Luna held her arm steady, feeling the shield still there. And then there was pain. The most intense pain Luna had ever felt bit into her body as wounds opened across her flesh. Blood sprayed from her wounds, and the blood was light. Luna held back her voice as her eyes widened in shock. The blood glowed a ghostly purple as it pooled and seeped into the dirt. The equines too gasped in horror as the being protecting them fell to her knees. "Luna! Luna!" her ghost screamed. The wolves howled once more and charged forward. Before any of them could make contact with their would-be prey, brilliant purple light flooded the area from the sky, tearing the wolves asunder, atom by atom, quark by quark, until nothing was left of their very existence. After a few moments, the light dissipated, and all was quiet. No howls, no screams, no gunshots, a whispering void light. Luna fell forward as her body lost consciousness, the screams of her ghost fading into the dark. The princesses looked on as the being collapsed to the ground, blood pooling in the dirt. For a moment, even Celestia and Luna couldn't fathom the sheer power of the magic the being had used. But then, as they collapsed, they heard the shape screaming at them. It turned and looked at them, its eyes a of blue light. Only then did the ponies realize what was happening. "We need to get them medical attention," Luna called, rushing forward, reaching out with her magic to the being and levitating them onto her back. "Tia, grab my things. Twilight Sparkle, guide us to Ponyville's hospital." Twilight snapped from the shot and rushed forward to get a running start as she took off, Luna just behind her. Even as they flew, Luna could feel the being's blood seeping out over her body. The sticky sensation only served. Oh god, I feel a sneeze coming. The sticky sensation only serving to urge her to go faster to save them. The whole flight, the shape floated by her side, releasing beams of light as the wounds and speaking in a rushed, panicked voice. Ponyville General Hospital was small when compared to other hospitals, like Canterlot's or Manhattan's. It was only 3 floors tall and had only 4 operating rooms, with their intensive care unit occupying only 30 rooms. At this point of night, there were very few ponies on staff, including 1 surgeon, 1 doctor, 2 nurses, and a receptionist. Said receptionist was named Clear Skies. She was a Pegasus pony with a pale blue coat and white mane. Oh god, more female voices. Not that I have anything against females, but, you know, I'm a man, obviously. And since I'm going for puberty, it's a little hard to do impressions, especially of females. I hope that didn't sound sexist. She was a Pegasus pony with a pale blue coat and white mane, who was still studying to become a nurse herself. The graveyard shifts were always mellow, which allowed her plenty of time to catch up on classwork. To say Clear Skies was surprised to see 3 of the 4 princesses sprayed in blood and carrying a strange creature would be the understatement to end all understandings. "We have an emergency! Call the doctors!" Luna said quickly. Whenever it's Princess Luna, I'm gonna make sure that you know that it's Princess Luna speaking. So, for now, I'm going to refer the Hunter as Luna and the Princess Luna as, well, Princess Luna. Clear skies yelped in surprise and paged the doctors for code blue as instructed. Within seconds, the doctors arrived for Gurney, hiding their shock incredibly well as he took the being from Princess Luna, and carted them off to operate. "Do you think they will survive?" Celestia asked, her voice shaking only enough for Luna and Twilight to notice. "We must hope. After what they did for us, we must hope," Princess Luna replied. If they lost more than three leaders, I don't think they can come back from that," Twilight murmured. "I can't imagine how much they lost." Back in the operating room, the entirety of the medical staff on call had entered and began cutting away the armor as best they could, until the shape pulsed with light, making the armor disappear. The doctors wasted no time, one casting a simple healing spell in an attempt to close a gash across the being's arm. The spell backfired, healthy cells attacking the newly regenerated tissue with extreme prejudice. Meanwhile, a nurse began soaking up blood in a steel cloth, trying her best not panic. Though she'd seen some particularly nasty cases, this took the cake by a long shot. Never had she seen a patient in such a sorry state. The Earth Pony mare, after getting the patient cleaned up, retrieved the supplies of stitches. The doctors thanked her and began sewing the being's flesh back together, the magic put to use minimizing the risk of contracting any possible blood-borne illnesses. After that, the being was doused in several layers of antibacterial ointments and wrapped up like a mummy. As simple as the process was, it took well over 2 hours to get it all right. The whole time, the shape watched. "How are they?" Luna asked. Princess Luna asked the doctor. The room was silent, save for the sound of the heart monitor and the breathing machine. The being was covered in enough bandages to wrap a small house, and he was hooked up to several machines. The shape watched the being through it all, hovering over to them. "Your friend was in a very, very sorry state. She lost a lot of blood." "She?" Twilight asked. "Indeed. Once her armor was off, we became about 95% sure she's female. Anyway, without knowing what she is, we can't risk transfusion. Her body has had an adverse reaction to Dr. Day's healing spell, putting us at risk of harming her more if we tried to help her body regenerate the lost blood. Unfortunately, we've done everything we safely can for her. How did she even come by those wounds?" Some kind of magical backfire." Okay, my Princess Luna impression is getting more and more horrible. But I'm doing this all in one sitting, just so you know. Okay, I can't put a real strain on my throat. Yep, thank God thank God these come like every week. Like once a week, I mean. Princess Luna said solemnly. "Although we aren't entirely sure if that's accurate." "No, that sounds about right. She reeks of curse magic," the doctor replied. "Whatever your friend here did, it certainly, pardon my language, bucked her way 6 ways to Sunday." "Doctor, you do realize this is... Well, then again, this fanfic is rated M." It's rated... So, mild cursing, even if it's, like, in a child-friendly way. But still, how dare you swear? I'm, I'm sorry for potting so much, I just like to commentate during my fanfic readings. But lucky she's got a pulse. "Thank you, Doctor. Do you have any estimate on how long it will take for her to wake?" Celestia asked. The doctor simply shook his head. "No, ma'am. If we were able to base it on blood loss alone, I'd say 6 days. But with curse magic as potent as what we could detect, it could be upwards of a year if she wakes up at all." "Thank you, Doctor," Celestia said, peering into the room where the being lay unconscious. Days passed. 2, 3. The nurses dutifully checked up on her every hour. 4, 5. The royal sisters returned to Canterlot after the 6th. After 7, Twilight wasn't sure the being would wake up. But still, the shape waited, watching the being intently, loyal as a dog. 8, 9. On the 10th day, there was a brief moment where the staff thought she'd wake up, but no such luck. 11, 12, 13. On the 14th day after that night, the being awoke. On duty that day was Nurse Redheart, who'd been there to help sew the being back together. Of course, she found it difficult to care for a patient with no name, and with the help of the princesses, she came up with the name Violet Light. Personally, she had named her Lapis Aurora after her blue skin and mane, and the subtle light that seemed to dance over her skin. But that was a debate to have with the patient herself. Now, Nurse Redheart was not immune to doubt. She'd seen cases where the odds were stacked heavily against patients both lower skates. One coach she'd seen broke her leg bad enough that the doctors were certain beyond a reasonable doubt that he'd never run again, and even she was confident that he wouldn't. Just 3 months ago, she'd been invited to a cross-country meet with the same coach placed first for his team. That in mind, Nurse Redheart was the most confident of everybody who knew about Violet that she'd wake up sooner rather than later. If the doctor said upwards of a year, she'd place her bets on a month at the least. She couldn't place why, but she felt a strong desire to help nurture this particular being more than any she'd care for. She was different, and more than just her body, she could feel it. So when strange voices came from Violet's room, when there weren't supposed to be any visitors on this floor at all, she rushed to see who was talking. As she turned the corner, she saw Violet sitting up in bed, hands working furiously to tear off the gauze. She was talking to someone in a language she didn't know, and the only other thing was the shape that had been floating by her the whole time. Setting that aside to process later, she rushed to Violet's side, placing her hoof on her arm and looking at her with pleading eyes as Violet looked at her with her own luminous amber ones. "Please, lay back and rest," she said calmly. The shape said something to Violet, and she seemed to calm down a bit, lying back down and leaving her bandages alone. She smiled softly at Violet, proceeded to push the page button on the side of the bed. From there, she removed a pair of blunt-tipped scissors to remove the gauze, so she could check on the stitches. Violet seemed unsure, but a word from the shape seemed to stay her fear. She proceeded from one of Violet's arms first, removing the bandages and gauze, revealing stitched flesh beneath. Surprisingly, it was healing at a normal rate, and she estimated these wounds needed only 2 more days before the stitches could be removed. Violet watched carefully, frowning as she observed her own condition. "You're lucky to be alive, you know," Nurse Redheart said. "By all accounts, you should be very, very dead." It was at this point that the doctor, Sunny Day, entered. "Oh my, she's awake!" he exclaimed. Oh wait, that's a male voice. Whoops. Violet seemed to back up a little, moving as far from the door as she could. Even with the shape talking to her, Violet seemed incredibly uneasy. "It's all right, Violet. He helped sew you back together," she said, trying to make sure her tone was reassuring and calm. Even with that, she did not seem to relax much. She turned to the doctor. "Go send for Twilight and the princess. Tell them my patient is awake." When she turned back, seemed to be grabbing for something at her hip, which drew her curiosity. She slowly and carefully reached to pull the bedsheet up to check if anything they'd missed a cut. This, however, was a bit too much, and Violet reacted quite poorly, slapping her hoof away and staring at her with fearful eyes. As much as it pained her, she had to check and be sure. With a patient unconscious for so long, it was well within the realm of possibility to miss an injury simply because the patient couldn't tell them it was there. She tried once more, looking into Violet's eyes as she slowly reached up once more. "I promise I won't hurt you. I just need to make sure you're okay," she said softly. The shape said something to her, and Violet turned to look at her, shaking her head with a weak smile. She said something, but Redheart didn't understand. But judging by the look on her face, she could hazard a guess that she said something akin to "thank you." With that, Nurse Redheart went to a cabinet across the room, fetching a few supplies from it, feeling Violet watching her the whole time. She returned with a stethoscope, approaching slowly. To her surprise, Violet took the end of the listening tool and placed it against her chest, allowing her to listen to her breathing. Shifting it a few times, she confirmed that her lungs were perfectly fine. Putting that away, she then returned with a fresh roll of bandages and some tape to secure it. Violet simply sighed out at the prospect, allowing her to replace the bandages she removed. "I hear our patient is awake," the voice of Princess Celestia said from the doorway. "Yes, ma'am. She's super nervous, but the shape is doing a fantastic..." Are they just gonna refer to ghosts as the shape? And that's just kind of funny. If anything, I thought they would refer to ghosts as Little Light, cause that's what Ghost was referred to in Destiny 1. "But the shape is doing a fantastic job keeping her calm," he said, reaching up and patting it. The shape seemed pleased with itself, but Violet was unamused by this gesture. At this point, Celestia, Luna, and Twilight all filed into the room, keeping a respectful distance for a moment. Well, Celestia and Luna kept a distance. Twilight, on the other hand, could not hold herself back and approached quickly, ringing up and hugging Violet tightly. All three of them looked on in shock, watching Violet's face shift from nervous to surprised to solemn. After a moment, she tentatively returned the gesture, saying something in its native tongue. The room remained silent, allowing this moment between two near strangers. Twilight didn't truly know Violet, nor did Violet truly know Twilight. But Violet had nearly sacrificed her own life to protect Twilight and the princesses, and Twilight had to show her gratitude somehow. And this tearful hug would have to do for now. After Twilight pulled away, she lit a horn. For a moment, Violet seemed skeptical of the situation, but relaxed after a moment. After that, Twilight attempted to speak to the being in Griffin, Zebran, Minotauran, Yakinese, Drakish, and even Doggies. But each time, Violet shook her head, knowing what she was trying but indicating each failure of language. Cursing her luck, Twilight released the translation spell and pulled out a piece of paper. She proceeded to draw what happened that night that she was brought in. Nurse Redheart gasped and shot at what she saw. Dozens of Timberwolves attacking from all sides, Violet with a shield in one hand. Twilight and the princesses stood in a bubble, but in the next panel, the bubble was gone, as was Violet's shield. In the next panel, Violet was covered in wounds and spraying blood. The next panel was left blank, and after that, Violet was on the ground bleeding out, no Timberwolves in sight. After that, the drawing showed Princess Luna carrying Violet to the hospital and then the emergency room. After that was the image of a sun, 14 times. When Violet looked over the paper, her eyes went wide, and the smell of fear immediately filled the room. She frantically spoke to the shape. For a pulse of light from the shape, a helmet appeared in her lap, and she donned it immediately. When she took it off, she seemed beyond shocked. Her eyes looked haunted, staring through the walls and into nothingness. She let the helmet drop to the floor, where it rolled until it stopped at Twilight's hoof. Twilight then placed a small book in her lap. "I know you can't understand me yet, but I promise you will. I'm going to teach you a question, and I'm going to thank you properly for what you did," she said, looking up at Violet with determination sparkling in her eyes. "I pinky promise. Cross my heart, hope to fly, stick a cupcake in my eye." I love whenever the characters do a pinky promise. Just don't break them, or else you're dead. No, I'm kidding. You're not gonna die. She couldn't die here. Or she could, but she couldn't come back from it if she did. Everything hurt, and it felt the same as when the Red Legion took the light just 3 years ago. She was without light once more, and that made her feel naked. Well, more naked than she was. She could tell that all she had covering herself was a bedsheet and a hospital gown. The mere fact she was in the hospital made her uneasy. Even without the light, her ghost was always able to heal her. Even during the Red War, before they made it to the Shard, she'd always been mauled by the Cabal's war beast, but her ghost had healed her as he always did. She barely had a scar from the ordeal, but now, even with that look of determination from Sparkle, and the reassuring gazes of Dawn, Midnight, and Red Cross, Luna found herself unable to feel up to the challenge of recovering and learning of the equine language. Even so, she couldn't just fuck off into the forest follow light or her ghost's ability to heal her. So really, she didn't have a choice. Hey Ghost, can you still connect to the transmat beacon by the ship? Luna asked curiously. Yeah, why? He replied, sensing a shift in the Guardian's demeanor. I'm going to have one of our friends place another beacon outside. Mind pulling one from storage? She asked. Plan? Learn their language, maybe teach them English. No, but wait. Both. Never mind. I'm not gonna question it. Learn their language, maybe teach them English. Notebooks would help. A moment later, a metal device shaped like a pill with a spike on one end and a green light on the other, locked onto a lap, transmaterialized for its place in Luna's ship. The equines around her seemed quite surprised, but didn't react too badly. She then mimed fighting towards Sparkle, earning her eager attention and the writing tool she needed. With that, Luna drew a simple picture of the transmat beacon in her lap, then of the crash site, and a similar beacon and an apple. Then, she drew Twilight placing the beacon outside her window, followed by the apple disappearing from the crash site and reappearing next to herself. Sparkle looked over at the drawings and her eyes went wide with the desire to learn. Immediately, she grabbed the beacon and her magic and headed outside, jabbing it into the dirt and planted her outside. Once she returned, Ghost pulled out the chest for her personal belongings to her, earning yet more surprised look from a guest. She proceeded to open the chest, quickly grabbing a notebook and a few pencils. When she set the chest down, Luna opened the notebook and looked at Sparkle. Alright, Sparkle, bring on the storm. I'm ready.